I'd like to introduce Dr. Wooday P. Krishna, President, Karnataka Gandhi Smaraka Nidhi, and Honorary General Secretary, Seshadripuram Educational Trust. I now request Dr. Wooday P. Krishna, sir, to welcome all the dignitaries to this international webinar.
Good evening, all of you. Of course, good evening in India and good morning in the US. Friends, Professor Ravivarma Kumar, former Advocate General, High Court of Karnataka, Dr. Mukul Sharma, Professor Ashoka University, Dr. Malini Ranganathan, Director, Antiracist Research and Policy Center of American University, Washington, DC, Professor N.S. Satish, Principal of Seshadripuram Evening College, Moderator, Professor Vinay Sagar LS, Coordinator Dharappa Kunnur, and Professor Sunil Kumar, distinguished faculty members, participants, research scholars, and invitees from almost 10 countries. And then we have more than about 1,150 registrations, and I'm told already more than 250 have already logged in. So, my dear participants, at the outset, I would like to extend a very, very warm welcome to Professor Ravivarma Kumar, former Advocate General, a constitutional expert in India, and who is a legal luminary. And in fact, I had the fortune of being his student when he was lecturing at the Honorary College of Law. Professor Ravivarma Kumar has also served as the chairman of the Karnataka Backward Classes Commission, and he has championed the cause of the dalits in Karnataka, and it is too well known, and particularly his contribution to the farmers by way of taking up important legal matters both before the Supreme Court and High Court is too well known. And we have such a distinguished person with us today to deliver the inaugural address on such an important international webinar organized by the Ambedkar Center of the college. Friends, I am very happy to tell you Seshadripuram Educational Trust, which is now 90 years old, and then which is now stepping into its 91st year of journey in the cause of education, has more than 17 degree colleges where we have Ambedkar Study Center, Gandhi Study Center, and Vivekananda Study Center functioning very actively since several years. Perhaps no other institution can boast of such a thing, and I am happy our institutions have been doing really very well. And this particular program is organized in association with American University, Washington, and Ashoka University, Haryana. And the topic is Anti-Caste Politics and Environmental Justice. And there are going to be a series of discussions, and therefore this particular webinar is numbered as Chapter 1. And I'm told, Professor Satish was telling me that the entire webinar proceedings would be properly documented and published either through the electronic mode or the print mode. That is something that we will take a call about it a little later. But then I would like to bring to you all greetings from the President and Trustees of Seshadripuram Educational Trust. Sir, we have with us Professor Ravivarma Kumar, who is a very distinguished legal luminary and who is eminently suited to speak on this most important subject of anti-caste politics and environmental justice. After his inaugural address, sir, I would extend a warm welcome to you, Professor Ravivarma Kumar, sir. I extend a warm welcome to the theme speakers, Dr. Mukul Sharma ji from Ashoka University and Dr. Malini Ranganathan, Director of the Antiracist Research and Policy Center of the American University, Washington. So both these eminent persons are going to share their thoughts on this vital topic. I'm sure the participation and the whole deliberation would be very much engaging, and not only engaging, but also very useful to all the participants. I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Mukul Sharma, Dr. Malini Ranganathan, our beloved principal, Professor N.S. Satish, our trustees. Many trustees have also logged in, I am told. Therefore, I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of them, all our faculty members and students who have gathered in big numbers. And the beauty is that we have participants from over 10 countries. So I once again extend a cordial welcome to each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me this honor of inaugurating this all-important webinar. I profusely thank all the organizers for this honor being conferred on me. Dr. Wooday P. Krishna, Dr. Malini Rangnath, Dr. Mukul Sharma, Dr. Professor Satish, and all the distinguished members of the faculties, the members of the managing committee of the Seshadripuram Educational Trust, and my dear friends. This is a very, very challenging subject that you have taken up for discussion today. Anti-caste politics and environmental justice. Very interestingly, the coincidence is way back in the year 1983, soon after I got married, a Swedish couple, a student couple, they walked into my house totally surprising me and presented to me a beautiful calendar on the movement in the apartheid, anti-apartheid movement of South Africa. And they were impressed by a very interesting work I had done in the Karnataka High Court against apartheid in the year 1981, which was flashed in the BBC. So they were attracted by that. So that kindled my interest in finding out what is happening in South Africa. I named my son as Avi Mandela in the year 1985. And in the year 1991, soon after Mandela was released from the prison, I received invitations from African National Congress to join my good and noble senior Sri L.G. Honorary to assist the African National Congress in preparing their draft constitution. So I went there, I participated. I am very happy and proud to tell you they have built in a very robust machinery for affirmative action at all levels, including the highest judicial forum, namely the Constitutional Court of South Africa. Section 174(2) of the South African Constitution, to which we contributed, both my senior and myself, has received worldwide attention, and South Africa now leads the nation on social justice in the world. So with this background, I soon after I returned, I had occasion to study the apartheid system, which was still in place in South Africa. So soon after I came back, I got an opportunity to work as chairman of the first Backward Classes Commission of the Karnataka state. And there I took up a socio-educational and economic survey of all the districts, of all the 176 talukas in the state. And I was stunned to notice that we were at the forefront of the anti-apartheid agitation in South Africa, whereas in India, we had the apartheid intact. Apartheid means aparthood, living apart. I noticed in Karnataka alone, there were 29,000 villages, and no village had allowed a former untouchable or a scheduled caste to stay in the village. All the scheduled castes, 101 castes in Karnataka, were kept out of the villages, revenue villages. They were living in hamlets, not even recognized as revenue villages. Likewise, nearly 8% of the scheduled tribe population in the state, they were residing outside the revenue villages. Most of them were residing in Delhi and tribal areas. And to these 29,000 revenue villages, which did not have any scheduled castes or scheduled tribes, the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, nearly 150 castes and tribes, they were living in exclusive ethnic habitats like Palageri, Madigrati, Golrati, Lamani Tanda, then Hadis, Hattis and Hadis in the forests like Jenukurba Hadis, or Vettapuruva Hadis. And this was a very big shocker to me. And in my report, I referred to it. This was nothing but apartheid practiced in India and which is still intact. Even after 70 years, we have over 6.5 lakh villages in the country and an equal number of bastis where the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes are living. In Karnataka, for 29,000 revenue villages, there are 30,000 ethnic habitats exclusive to each one of these caste or tribe. And this is nothing but apartheid. And I therefore, I want this all-important webinar to touch upon this aspect of the prevailing apartheid in India, where ethnic habitats are fully intact even to this day after 70 years. So with this background, let me tell you about the anti-caste politics I have perceived. In my considered opinion, the first anti-caste politics was started in the then Madras presidency by the Justice Party, and which is the forerunner of Dravida Munnetra Kalagam, and today it has split into several other political parties. All of them claim to be secular, and they work against the prevailing caste system, and that has a very deep root pursuant to Periyar Ramaswamy's teachings and his self-respect movement launched in this thing. Karnataka has a longer history. Basaveshwara in the 12th century launched the biggest agitation against the caste system. But in politics, we don't find the Basaveshwara followers practicing anti-casteism wherever they are. On the contrary, they are trying to perpetuate the existing caste system. So in Karnataka, I don't find any anti-caste politics at all being practiced. But at the all India level, I should record with great appreciation the contribution of the socialist movement led by Dr. Ramanohar Lohia, the Socialist Party, the Socialist Samyukta Party, the Praja Socialist Party, headed by Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, Achyut Mehta, and others, who launched a very big tirade against the caste system. But those movements were not very successful politically, though to some extent, as long as Dr. Lohia was there, it was gaining ground till 1967, when the Congress party was made to lose power in 9 states, and its majority in the parliament had also come down drastically. But the first and foremost thing I should record here is how all the orthodox forces, the casteist forces, the Saffron Brigade, rallied against Jawaharlal Nehru in the 1952 elections. One Mr. Brahmachari, Brahmachari, contested as an independent with the support of Jansan, with the support of Vishwa Hindu Parishad, and with the support of Ramarajya Party to defeat Nehru, as Nehru was found to be cosmopolitan, he was found to be secular, and more importantly, he had ushered in a secular constitution in the country. So they tried their best to defeat Nehru in 1952 elections, but they failed, and that is how India succeeded in becoming a secular country. So we have that this thing, but then we don't find much politics, much anti-caste politics prevailing. Though Mandal has brought about a sea change in the political scenario in the country, where the upper caste hegemony has been brought down, particularly in the cow belt, and now the competition is among the backward classes as to who should become the chief minister. whether it is Lalu Yadav, Mulayam Singh Yadav, Kalyan Singh, or the Dalit leader from Bahujan Samaj Party. See, these are the forces that are now operating and taking very big role in the anti-caste politics. But they cannot be described as anti-caste politics. But more importantly, when they practice the caste politics of their caste, definitely it works against other castes. To that extent, there is polarization of the caste forces. And perhaps the biggest caste organization of the political party is the BJP, which is now ruling the country. They don't call themselves as a Brahmin party. They call themselves as Hindu Rashtravadis. But the ultimate goal, as we have seen in the recent amendment to the constitution, is providing reservation to the Brahmins in the name of economically weaker sections. Is a very big indicator of what they are. They essentially, it is a Brahmin party, Honorary party, and that is what caste politics is all about. Otherwise, today, except the handful of communist organizations, left political parties, there is no one preaching or practicing anti-caste politics in India. Having said this, let me tell you about environmental justice. I am extremely happy we have such eminent speakers, so I am not going to dwell much into it, except making two statements. One is the practice of apartheid, which I have mentioned, which calls for environmental justice in a very big way. Every project launched in the forest results in eviction of forest dwellers who are scheduled tribes. And every major project, be it a dam or a big highway project or some other project which results in eviction of either the scheduled caste or the backward classes from their habitats. So this is where there is a very big need of environmental justice. More so, the prevailing apartheid, which has resulted in segregation of nearly 25 to 30% of our population in exclusive ethnic habitats. That is, I request this webinar to deliberate on that. And the second and more important aspect is, after the economically weaker sections category has been introduced in the Constitution of India by the 103rd Amendment, introducing two additional provisions in the Constitution, providing reservations. See, for example, what has happened in Karnataka. Less than 5% of the population in Karnataka, including Brahmins and Vaishyas, will get 10% reservation, as against the scheduled castes, who constitute 18% of the population, getting only 15% of the reservation. Scheduled tribes, who constitute nearly 8% of the population, getting only 3% reservation. And the backward classes, who constitute nearly 70% of the population, getting only 32% reservation. Whereas Brahmins and Vaishyas, who are not even 4%, they get a full 10% quota. So this may call for a bigger this thing, what Dr. Ramanohar Lohia had preached long ago, namely proportional representation to all castes and communities. 100% reservation, making various caste blocks, so that no caste is unhappy, no caste is deprived of its legitimate quota. So these are the aspects on which I would have requested the webinar to focus upon. And having said these things, I don't want to come in the way of the eminent team speakers presenting their views. I am eager to listen to them as well. So I very I'm delighted to throw open this webinar for this interesting debate. And I once again thank all the organizers for giving me the honor of inaugurating this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kunnur. You are the one who got us together on this day. So thanks again. And thanks, Professor Satish, for the Golden Jubilee celebration of your college. We are really proud of your college and institution like this that actually give hopes to this country. And really thanks, Professor Ravivarma Kumar, for giving such a inspiring speech or welcoming speech. People like you actually have provided us the freedom to still live and speak out in this country. And again, thanks to Dr. Wooday Krishna for your inaugural speech. So, and we are very happy to contribute a little bit of ours to your Golden Jubilee celebration, and will be very much happy to contribute even in the coming days in whatever way possible. So, beginning with my topic, so what are Dalit ecologies? How do we characterize and understand this somewhat a new term? In this Dalit ecology series, today I would like to take you through the passages of history to understand Dalit perspective, their vantage points, their experiences on ecologies. And the history of Dalit ecologies could also be a counter history, different from the dominant narrative of Indian ecological history. In my understanding, trying to actually historicize Dalit environmental perspective and analyzing the present environmental issues that confront all of us is quite challenging because there is hardly work being done in this area by our environmental researchers and writing. Historicizing Dalit ecological experiences will also create a corpus of knowledge produced by Dalit communities themselves, and will also strengthen our ways towards a better, sustainable, and just future. So, the history of Dalit ecologies can be traced through different threads of Dalit universe and thoughts. It could be mythological, anecdotal, theoretical, rational, religious, and many other ways. Such histories from Dalit and such kind of history writing also call for an expansion of our text, literature, materials, and methods of inquiry and discourse. An exercise that I have just said has begun to put into practice by Dalit intellectuals and artists themselves. And one can actually apply a range of Dalit creations, their poems, songs, folk tales, stories, cultural collective expressions that reveal Dalit ecological world. In today's talk, in limited time, between 20 to 25 minutes, I will primarily focus on the intellectual history of some prominent anti-caste movements and their leaders in India. Professor Kumar was also giving a little bit of the journey of the socialist movement and many other party and politics in that respect. My aim here is to show some facets of Dalit ecologies through the works of Jyotirao Phule and E.V. Ramaswamy Periyar, was mentioned by Professor Kumar, two of the greatest anti-caste leaders of the late 19th century and 20th century. I must also mention Dr. Ambedkar here. Since you have had a webinar on Ambedkar and green democracy, I will not focus on him today. I argue by focusing Phule and Periyar that contrary to conventional wisdom, anti-caste leaders and movement have not been indifferent to ecological worlds and values. Rather, their writing, their campaign, their movement reflect a living tradition of Dalit environmental thought. Phule and Periyar had a great deal to say on how slavery and caste oppression affected Dalit relationship to natural resources, and their argument actually offer an insight into human relationship with nature in general. In certain ways, they symbolize a broader trend of anti-caste leaders and movements and their engagement with nature and environmental philosophy. For example, just take an example of Mangu Ram, a leader of the well-known Adidhar movement in Punjab, who adopted a non-theist notion of divinity that was consistent with some of the beliefs of lower caste people, where the role of God was played by nature. Similarly, I come from North India, a well-known lower caste leader, Achyutanand, from North India, who had a lot to say about Mother Earth, land, and forest. Similarly, as Professor Ravi Kumar mentioned, the leaders and thinkers of the Dravidian tradition questions the Indus Valley civilization and celebrated a past that lay outside the pale of dominant civilization, a natural and social life populated by hill cultivators, hunters, fisherfolk, and the like. So now, with this background, coming close to Jyotirao Phule, 1827 to 1890, Phule has been described as a revolutionary, an agrarian radical, one of the greatest social reformers, father of social revolution, and India's first systematic theorist of caste. Undoubtedly, Phule was a central figure in the struggle against caste system, who initiated social movements for the liberation of lower caste, the underprivileged, and the women. However, since his early days, Phule was also a leading proponent of a set of ideas targeted to change the state of peasants, agriculture, and production systems that also promised to leave an environmental legacy. Some of his work, like Gulamgiri, slavery, and Setkaracha Asur, cultivators whipcord, shows how Phule thought of the environmental burdens of Dalit living with slavery and a hierarchical social order, just as he explored ways of intervening in the situation and altering it through social change in the natural order. We know how caste society naturalizes inequality, basing it on karma, culture, tradition, natural resources, and religious beliefs. In this scheme, natural and social orders are identical. The entire earth is viewed as a caste-specific ecosystem where humans' eco-niche is also predetermined. The key to caste society lies in re-embedding people in their perceived natural place. However, Phule questions this apparent cohesion of natural and social order, a collective identity that ultimately becomes the arbiter of an unjust human society and politics. Thus, Rogelino O'Hanlon, who has done a pioneering work on Phule, says that Phule put forward the notion of the divine as a single and unique being, the creator of all existing things and the source of moral law for human society. A clear separation was made in Phule between sacred or divine forces and the natural and social order. The natural world, devoid of magical significance, was left open to investigation by secular reason in all its empirical, scientific, and instrumental forms. So the agrarian landscape, land, farmer, agriculture, was particularly prominent in Phule's natural and social world. He identified the peasant as Bali Raja, the lord of the land, common man, and emphasized the importance of peasant, that is Bali, and the peasant culture, giving a detailed historic and contemporary account of slave society. His narratives provided insights on effect of subjugation on low caste relationship with land. Images and dialogues around land, agriculture, and farmers capture the social world by contrasting its dreadful status with the possibilities integrated in changing the natural order. While talking of the exploitation of the lower caste, Phule often invoked an environmental imagery. References to Bali Raja by Phule were closely connected to trees and leaves, which were regarded by him as equivalent to gold. Celebrating nature, Phule regarded earth-born gods as protector of land. Phule sometimes resorted to nature to understand caste histories and its social and economic meanings for Sudras, arguing that nature was constantly being contested and negotiated just like caste. He further stated that the history of the Varna from its very inception had its roots in village land and natural resource system. According to him, caste created a characteristic landscape of land, water, well, forest, and community in villages. The history of Varna, according to him, molded the history of land, water, and forest in several ways. Phule had a blueprint of reforms in agriculture, land, water, and forest based on values of ecology, equity, and autonomy, where he tried to rework the basic economic and social assumptions of agrarianism inherited from Brahmins and government. G.P. Deshpande, who has worked on Phule, basing himself on the work of Ashok Chausalkar, summarized actually in detail the suggestions of Phule, gleaned from his voluminous writing on agriculture and production conditions that offer a summary of his social, economic, cultural, and environmental aspect that could be called Phule's ecological agrarianism. And that was the Phule. Now, in a fast-forward manner, coming to the E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, and I'm very happy that Professor Kumar actually mentioned about Periyar, popularly called Periyar, the great man, who has been, we know, known as one of the chief progenitor of Dravidian movement in South India. His ideas and writings on a wide range of issues, caste, religion, language, self-respect, women's rights, social reforms, rationalism, capitalism, socialism, have been well researched. He has been rightly described as a fervent opponent of the northern domination of Indian politics, culture, and religion, a firebrand champion of human dignity, who throughout his life spread the messages of rationalism, atheism, abolition of casteism, gender justice, and self-respect for the so-called Sudras, and fought for their causes with the people and among the people, and so on and so forth. However, Periyar's complex ideas and writing also deal with village tradition, community, natural resources, food, science, technology, economics, and property in a wider context of Sudras and anti-caste movements, which together can be woven into a fabric of dalit ecologies aimed at attaining conditions necessary to live in harmony with the natural and social world. Periyar's rational attitude to social problems insisted on taking several natural factors into account. These natural factors were not simply juxtaposed to society, rather Periyar sought the causal interconnection between subordination, hierarchy, and ecology. Village, land, agriculture, and economy were seen as operating in social conditions characterized by caste, Brahmanism, social inequality, orthodox tradition, and domination. In concrete reality, the Sudra nature interconnection, according to Periyar, operated as a Sudra caste and nature interconnection, and the road to harmony between dalit and natural resources thus lay in solving the caste nature problem, which for Periyar meant that profound ecological problem could only be solved through progress in socio-cultural, economic, industrial, technical, scientific, moral, and ethnic realms of the knowledge. In distilling, organizing, and contextualizing Periyar's view, we can pinpoint at least three aspects of knowledge: social, scientific, and humanistic. That is moral and ethical. And knowledge provided a basis for deep social change, which imperatively demands a reconstruction of natural forces. The domination of Brahmanism for Periyar also derived from monopoly over natural resources and property, and the Varna Jati economy. Brahmins monopolized land, the basic element of nature, and through it dominated the Sudras. In Periyar's understanding, alienation of Sudras from natural resources and control of natural resources by a very few was a crucial element of private property and caste economy. For Periyar and his self-respect movement, ownership of and social relations around natural resources played an important role in creating society. Ownership of natural resources lay at the heart of social relations in Periyar's understanding. Therefore, possibilities of constructing and indeed perfecting relation between humans and nature depended not only on the development of technology and so on and so forth, but to a great extent on the character of property relations and control over natural resources. Thus, the aims and ideals of Self-Respect Party of South India in its Erode program asked for the public ownership without compensation of all agricultural land, forest and other lands. It also committed itself to get for the landless workers and agricultural laborers working in cultivable lands, estates and waters, a reasonable share in the produce of such lands, estates and water. According to Periyar, caste economy also thrives on tradition and traditional occupation. That is, according to him, was antagonistic to the natural and social world. Tradition, according to him, conditions all important social and natural developments. Glorification of tradition in a caste society implies rejection of material production and complete merging of society and nature. According to him, tradition leads to the liquidation of Sudras as a human being because it prevents innovation of labor, social production, and material production in a new social unit based on science and technology. Traditional occupation objectively mean reducing man to the animal level. And so Periyar makes nonsense of any proposal to revive any kind of traditional occupation. He believed that there can be no equal society or equal individuals without material production. And thus he has stated that who benefits by this glorification of traditional occupation, by this revival of tradition? None other but the Brahmin who deceived the people, the rich who reap the labor of the poor, the educated who wish to lead their lives without the least physical effort. In short, the powerful who advocate a politics which would strengthen their dominance. So Periyar understood that there could be no community in caste society, and therefore tried to create a new community with some distinct human features. Community, according to him, was a chromosome of caste as an unjust system, and Hinduism its justifying agent, with Brahmins sustaining and promoting both. The emphasis on karma theory reduced the majority to a passive, silent, and submissive class for the dominant. Periyar believed that if they, as a community, had considered other castes as members of the same family, there wouldn't have been so many social evils permitted and perpetuated in the name of God and religion. So thus, Periyar's and his self-respect movement desire for a community of rational, fraternal, freedom-loving citizens, equal with each other in every imaginable way, was propelled by his term Samdhara. Samdhara actually constituted the founding principle of the new republic, Periyar the way imagined, and as was conceived as a refutation of Manu Dharma. The distinctive feature of Samdharma or Samdhara was manifested in self-respect movement, and Professor Kumar mentioned about the Justice Party, consisted of broad economic, social, cultural, and environmental theme with wide spectrum of campaigns and movement. However, repeated references to land, farmers, agriculture, natural resources in Periyar's writing and campaign revealed that he discussed ecological relations in community from the position and perspective of the wretched life of the lower caste. So now, Periyar criticism of village was also very sharp, in contrast to Mahatma Gandhi. According to him, the word village should not found a place in politics in any way. In the same breath, dealing with the village reform and constructive plan for village development, Periyar proposed wide-ranging changes in the state of agriculture and farmers. So, thus, specific features of caste society and economy, as well as challenges to ensuring respect and dignity to lower caste, made imperative the integration of natural, social, and economic aspect, where Periyar questions the contemporary political discourse on natural resources, labor, tradition, community, technology, and science, and differed sharply with the environmental vision or political vision propagated by Mahatma Gandhi. So Periyar environmentalism in a rural context stood for certain basic democratic agrarian principle, demanding economic and social equality, and identifying some key areas of action from the world of work and production to lifestyle choices and consumption, and so on and so forth. So in conclusion, I would like to say that such histories and anti-caste thinkers, in fact, provide us the entry point to lay ground for the conceptual framework on dalit ecologies in the broader framework of environmental justice and anti-caste movement. The histories and ongoing experiences of Dalit community require, as I said, a new vision for environmental history. One that connect their marginalization and vulnerability to environmental crisis, climate change, and others from the broader political, social, and economic history of Dalit life and death. The understanding of Dalit ecologies, according to me, will certainly be complex and conflict-ridden, because, as I say, that anthropocentric or biocentric views of environment will not be able to explain their Dalit ecologies. These anthropocentric or biocentric views of environment are primarily based on human experiences. However, the experiences of an ex-untouchable, or an outcast, often considered and treated and placed as less than a human being, deprived to the rights of natural resources, are many times not compatible with the boundaries of human nature. The challenge is to understand the meanings and implication of nature for those living on the margins of human existence, and there lies the key to understand the world of dalit ecologies and environmental justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Namaskara, ellargu dhanyavadagalu, and Jai Bhim. Thank you so much to Seshadripuram Evening Degree College and the Ambedkar Study Center for hosting this extremely timely and relevant and long overdue conversation. Thank you especially to the organizer, Mr. Kumar, for bringing us together, and to my fellow panelists, Dr. Krishna, Professor Kumar, Dr. Sharma, Mr. Sagar, and Professor Satish. Today, I am happy to present some of my research on caste, segregation, and environmental injustices in urban India, with a focus on the history and contemporary situation in Bengaluru. And actually, my presentation is a very nice complement to what you heard from Professor Sharma, because it shifts our gaze to the urban situation. And while I will draw on some history, it also shifts our gaze to the contemporary situation in cities across India, with Bangalore being the focus. At the outset, I would like to say that much of my learning on Dalit rights and land and housing rights in Bengaluru is indebted to the activism and journalism of Slum Jagatu, and in particular the work of longtime journalist Mr. Isaac Arul Selva. As you will see, some of the work that I will present today is based on a research partnership with Slum Jagatu and the stories that Slum Jagatu has published about displacement, land grabs, and environmental harms. So this talk will analyze the relationship between caste-based spatial segregation and environmental inequalities in urban India. And it draws on about a decade and a half of research I've been conducting on the politics of housing, water, flooding, and other ecological vulnerabilities in Bengaluru. Just reflecting on where I am based, at American University in Washington, DC, I currently direct the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center. So as was mentioned, I conduct research on segregation and racism in the US too. My theoretical lens is thus necessarily comparative, shaped by the reality of racism, segregation, and inequality in the US. In the US, poorer Black, Latino, and Native American indigenous populations are exposed to disproportionately high levels of air and water contaminants, deep segregation and ghettoization, and unsafe and precarious housing and land tenure conditions, all of which lead to adverse health outcomes and reduced life chances. Now, I'm not saying that the situation between India and the US is exactly the same. Of course, they have very different political economies and historical geographies. But what I am saying is that it is useful for us as scholars and activists and thinkers in this global community to think comparatively at the scholarly and policy and legal frameworks around environmental law and environmental justice in both contexts. What I have observed is that while analyses of racism have been foundational to movements around activism and law in the US, particularly led by African American activists, there has been a notable silence around questions of caste in parallel environmental movements in India. As Amita Babiskar has argued, cities in India practice, in fact, the opposite, a kind of bourgeois environmentalism, in which the upper classes and castes want to create a clean and beautiful green city, cleansed of the homes and livelihoods of the poorer and lower castes. Now, where social difference has been addressed in scholarship and activism, the focus tends to be on Adivasi, namely tribal and indigenous struggles against deforestation, dams, and other extractive processes. With the notable exception of scholarship by Mukul Sharma, whom you just heard from, there is almost no critical studies of the operation of caste and environmental injustices in urban India, nor of explicitly anti-caste politics and environmental resistance. This is a troubling silence given how notions of caste purity and pollution continue to structure all manner of inequalities, environmental, social, political, and spatial in India, from the labor and health burdens of sanitation workers, to uneven flooding and climate change disasters, to unequal access to housing and water. It is a well-known fact that 400 Dalits have died from manual scavenging since 2014. In the aftermath of the Chennai floods of 2015, another example, studies have shown that Dalits were the most severely harmed by the disaster itself and post-flood cleanup efforts. Across India, slums mainly occupied by SC/ST groups, who are the laboring backbone of the city, are constantly under threat of eviction. And more subtle than some of these trends that I have discussed, vegetarian-only rental stipulations in housing markets are highly caste prejudiced. By favoring vegetarians like Brahmins, Lingayats, and Jains, such policies curtail housing opportunities for the vast majority of caste groups, as well as for Muslims and Christians. What this means is that these groups must find accommodation in slums or in peripheral and poorly serviced unauthorized revenue layouts, as you see in Bengaluru. In short, caste, expressed both overtly and subtly, is the unmarked marker of a range of spatial and environmental injustices in urban India. African-American scholar Ruth Wilson Gilmore defines racism as the state-sanctioned or extra-legal group-differentiated vulnerability to premature death. This is a very stark definition. Gilmore insists that this is how racism operates in the United States, regardless of the intent of the harm producer. This is a really crucial point for the Indian situation. It does not matter that housing, environmental, or other types of policies in India are not intentionally casteist, nor that in India's case, the Constitution's Article 17 formally abolishes untouchability. What matters is that empirically speaking, what matters is that in terms of the outcomes of environmental disparities by caste, right, injustices continue to be sustained along caste, class, ethnic, and religious lines, regardless of whether there is a casteist intent. And this is a very important legal distinction that environmental justice activists have picked up on in the US. Regardless of whether you can prove intent or not, if the outcome is disparate, then you must prosecute and you must follow up on those outcomes. The practice of untouchability. For Ambedkar, untouchability was sustained not only by long entrenched social hierarchy, but also by spatial distancing and demarcations of public and private property. The village well, the temple, even roads were off limits for Dalits, who, despite their vital labors, were relegated to peripheral ghettos within the village and on the urban outskirts. And this is actually the word that has been used in Ambedkar's writings. In volume 7 of his collected speeches titled The Untouchables, Who Were They and Why They Became Untouchables, Ambedkar specifically theorizes untouchability as a spatial phenomenon. Okay, this is really a really important kind of thesis of this talk as well. He says, and I quote, "Untouchability is not a case of social separation, a mere stoppage of social intercourse for a temporary period. It is a case of territorial segregation and of cordon sanitaire, putting the impure people into a barbed wire, into a sort of cage. Every Hindu village has a ghetto. The Hindus live in the village and the untouchables live in the ghetto." And as was mentioned at the opening, in force, this continues to reproduce itself ceaselessly in villages across Karnataka and the rest of India. Being from an untouchable caste himself, Ambedkar had experienced these indignities firsthand in rural Maharashtra. Against Gandhiji's romanticizing of the village, Ambedkar saw the modern city as holding the potential to end territorial segregation and the disease of casteism. Yet, as the Dalit scholar Gopal Guru has written, the city did not provide the escape hoped for by Ambedkar. As Guru has put it bluntly, quote, "The social morphology of the villages was replaced even in most of the urban cities of India, where elites do not distinguish untouchables from physical dirt." In fact, those who write for Slum Jagatu in Bengaluru have identified the same thing. As Selva told me in one of our conversations a few years ago, quote, "Bangalore is like a village. In the center is the Agrahara, the place for upper caste, the land-owning community. On the outside are the untouchables. All the slums are dominated by Dalit and untouchable communities. Land grabbing is reinforcing untouchability. end quote. Now, of some extent, attenuated these spatial and caste disparities in urban areas, especially among the more dominant and landholding OBCs and touchable SC/ST groups who have risen to political power over the last few decades. But as seen by the hazing, humiliation, and suicide of Dalit students in India's cities, by the lynching of beef-eating Dalits and Muslims, and you can well imagine that this word lynching that's used in the Indian media is extraordinarily resonant with the US, because of course that is what occurred throughout the US South of African Americans, and by massive slum evictions. Most recently, we've been seeing that in fact there's a massive slum colony in the railway area of Delhi that's again been threatened by eviction. So we see that the space of the city is not inclusive, contra what Ambedkar had hoped for urbanization. Crucially, as Sukhdev Thorat has written, the denial of property rights plays a major role in restricting opportunities, dignity, and life chances for the caste-burdened urban poor. And we heard about the intellectual history of Periyar and others through Professor Sharma's talk. And in fact, property was a huge preoccupation for Dalit intellectuals and continues to be a really important terrain for the waging of anti-caste politics, which are more grassroots in nature and not necessarily taken up by political parties. In Bengaluru, segregation along caste lines was practiced well before the British arrived, but was hardened and written into urban planning law during the colonial period. So here's a photograph taken from 1898, which is the demolishing of a slum in Bengaluru in the aftermath of the plague epidemic of 1898. The Bangalore City Improvement Trust, which later became the CITB, City Improvement Trust Board, and then the BDA, was tasked with the eradication of slums thought to breed disease and criminality. CITB was also tasked with the building of hygienic suburbs like Seshadripuram, with modern water and sanitation, new taxation and betterment measures, and other protocols. But it's very important to note that British and upper caste urban planners and engineers routinely denigrated in discourse and in practice lower caste groups and quote unquote Mohammedans, which was the archaic word for Muslims, for their innate dirty practices and superstitions. And this kind of denigration and dehumanization continues to the present. These patterns continue today, as you can see by some of the kind of urban segregation patterns within Bangalore. A lot of the SC/ST groups living in slums continue to be denigrated. Today, in what is perhaps most the granular quantitative study on the subject yet, researchers Bharati, Malgan, Mishra, and Rahman found that caste segregation in Bengaluru is fractal, which means not only are large metro areas segregated as a whole across wards, core, periphery, but at smaller and smaller scales, such as the census block, right, such as small scales, segregation is ceaselessly reproduced, effectively mimicking rural patterns. Because Dalits and other lower caste groups are meat-eating and engage in leather work and other forms of manual labor, their self-made settlements are treated as polluted and ostracized ghettos with precarious conditions of property and land tenure. Okay, so looking now a little bit more closely at my research qualitatively in Bangalore. My research confirms the quantitative studies that segregation is reproduced ceaselessly in Bangalore. Not only do we see these patterns in a core periphery model across the whole city, but we also see them within wards and within census blocks. My own ethnographic research brings to light some of the stories underlying segregation and environmental inequality. Take the example of Madina Nagar in Bomanahalli zone in southern Bangalore. It is a low-lying neighborhood built near two major keres or wetlands, Agara and Belandur. It is a highly flood-prone area crisscrossed by Raja Kalaves, stormwater drains, and keres. It is largely occupied by Dalit Muslims, who were sold the land unwittingly through unauthorized revenue layout sales that are common throughout the city's peripheries. It is a common misconception that untouchability affects only Hindu communities. To the contrary, untouchability is also widely practiced across religions and among Christians and Muslims, even after conversion to these religions. While exact figures are hard to come by, it is believed that well over half of Christians and half of Muslims in India are from Dalit, tribal, and OBC backgrounds. Averaged across South India, the number of Christians and Muslims that are SC/ST is closer to 75%. This is exactly that. It's a Muslim SC/ST neighborhood that's highly flood prone on the peripheries of Bangalore. In 2014, I did some research in Madira Nagar, and I accompanied the executive engineer, Mr. Majid, to examine the area. He pointed out a house that had been demolished by the BBMP. So I said, why has this house been demolished? He said, because we're trying to make the city more flood proof. We're trying to make sure that flooding doesn't happen. But he added, it's much easier for BBMP to demolish the houses of the poor than to touch large apartment buildings who are also encroaching on those keres and Rajakalavas, where middle-class peoples and RWAs are powerful. What Mr. Majid was talking about was exactly an example of bourgeois environmentalism. So I started to look at the case of a slum near Puttanhalli Lake called Lakshmi Nagar slum. The slum, as you can see in the foreground of this picture, is adjacent to some posh apartment buildings in South Bangalore. Comprising largely rural migrants of an SC/ST background from Ramanagara district, the slum has been fighting an eviction order by the High Court, which aims to resettle the households, some 115, to Betadathanapura near Electronic City. So in 2019, I partnered with Slum Jagatu to investigate the story a little bit more. And Slum Jagatu, as you can see here, some of their publications, has been documenting the history of land in Bengaluru for 2 decades now. At the Slum Jagatu office, when you walk in, one quote stands out, which summarizes the organization's mission. As long as lions have no historians, tales of history will glorify the hunter. Slum Jagatu's goal is to document these untold histories against the dominant narratives of the hunter. One of the most telling findings that we've discovered from Lakshmi Layout slum is how the discourse, that is to say the language of encroachment, which is a legal language, is marshaled to evict Dalit majority slums. Encroachment is a veiled casteist discourse that perpetuates urban environmental inequality. Court documents repeatedly refer to the slums residents as encroachers, almost to the extent of criminalizing them, and have passed an order to resettle them in small sheds far from their places of work or social networks. Bourgeois environmental narratives even justify this. Now we know that across Bangalore, high-end malls, SEZs, apartment buildings have also routinely encroached on keres and Rajakalavas. But it is not them that are called encroachers. It is the slums that are called encroachers. Protected by corporate power, it is the high-end buildings that are actually absolved in court orders. This double standard is something that activists have picked up on in a kind of grassroots way. And even if it's not explicitly anti-caste, I think it is an important component of a grassroots anti-caste politics. By way of conclusion, I want to end more philosophically with a quote from Black feminist activist Angela Davis. Interestingly, Angela Davis was also a participant in anti-apartheid struggles in the 20th century. And she says perhaps one of the most important quotes for the anti-racism movement in the United States today. She says, and I quote, "In a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist." I put up this quote to establish lines of international solidarity. While the struggles are not the same of, let's say, Blacks and other minorities in America and Dalits and minorities in India, they stem from the fundamental historical root of group differentiated vulnerabilities and the dehumanization of particular groups. Ambedkar himself recognized this transnational solidarity when he did his PhD in the US. So what if we transpose this to the Indian situation? In a casteist society, it is not enough to be non-casteist. We must be anti-caste. What would it mean to be anti-caste? It would mean to forge a proactive struggle to dismantle Brahmanism and forms of institutional casteism that endure despite constitutional rights. It would be to realize that you don't have to be intentionally casteist. In fact, in the outcomes, they can actually be along caste lines, and that's what we must also focus on. To be anti-caste would be to recognize that environmental injustices befall Dalits due to historical forms of segregation. To be anti-caste would be to expose veiled casteist discourses like encroachment and other practices, and to realize that some of the worst environmental crimes are in fact committed by those who perpetuate these discourses. To be anti-caste, finally, would be to build a more livable, sustainable, just, and humane world. Thank you.
Thank you, Malini Madam, for your words of expertise. Now the floor is open for the interaction. As we are running out of time, we take up only few questions which we have received in the chat box. I request Sunil sir to moderate the interaction session. Sunil sir.
So the first question to Mukul sir. So can't we keep our caste within the four walls of our homes? Why unnecessarily drag into the human relationship and spoil the harmony among the humans?
It's not we actually, we are making the caste system to spoil the society. It's the caste system actually who is spoiling the society and the nature. Caste system permeates overreach to each and every moment, system, property, experience, living, occupation, even in our contemporary world. And that's why you would see Dalits getting killed over the issue of caste. You will see caste conflict. You will see caste issues on natural resources. So it's everywhere, centuries old. So when we try to dissect the issue of environmental concern for humanity, the main point here is that caste make the environmental politics issues concern more and more conflict and then more and more challenging for all of us. Caste decide the nature of water, caste decide the nature of land, caste decide who owns, who doesn't own, caste decide the economy. So that is the basic fact of our life.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And the next question to Malini, ma'am. Ma'am, if a participant want to know is a caste feeling a self decision? Does it change the political decision? Could you explain the correlation between the caste system as a social environment and our physical environment?
So if I can interpret this in some way, the question is really, do caste-related feelings enter into political decision-making and enter into political frameworks? And I think the reality is they absolutely do. And can we, I think the follow-on question is, can we change this? So, you see throughout India in popular electoral politics, that the caste card is very much thrown in terms of trying to get people to vote along caste lines. But many times people will also resist this kind of temptation to foment caste-related divisions in electoral politics. However, the reality is it continues to happen, and I think there's both a downside to this, which is more and more divisiveness in politics, as well as an upside, which is that there are now some very powerful Dalit political figures, right, that are fighting elections. And for better or for worse, of course, they have mixed records. I think this has also galvanized the vote. But I think what we want to move towards is people being able to cast votes according to ethics and what they believe is right and what they believe will actually improve society. And so for that, the caste must be used as a sort of as something that we're eventually trying to break down, and not really the basis of which we organize society. And this is why I think it's so imperative for us to kind of work towards smashing caste. And although that's a very tall order, this is what I ultimately believe is necessary.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And one more question to you, ma'am. It's about the topic which you have spoken in the webinar. One of the person, they are telling that he is a vegetarian and he don't have any problem with the non-vegetarians, and he even eat together with them. But when the cooking fish and other meat, it produces a sort of smell which he personally don't like, and he sure many of people don't like that. That's why. It's like we don't want a non-vegetarian for a rent in our house. So I am racist for not giving a rent on non-vegetarians.
Yeah, this is a very, I think this is a very common question that arises. It's not this idea that I'm not being discriminatory. I just simply don't like the smell of meat. I think you are free to practice your own preferences. Absolutely, the law shouldn't necessarily interfere as long as your actions are not in some ways creating discriminatory impacts on society, right? So for instance, if many rental PG units say vegetarians only, then what you're doing collectively is you're reducing the amount of housing options for people that that are not in that category, right? And I think that's where there is an issue with people taking this personal private behavior and externalizing it to society. And so if it's been shown that this personal vegetarian preference, when reproduced multiple times, is actually creating a skewing of the rental market, and then I think it starts to become a problem, exactly as I said, of discriminatory outcome, right? It doesn't matter if you yourself aren't racist or casteist, and it's not enough just to say I'm not casteist, right? The fact is that the wider outcome is one of discrimination. So that's where I think I come down on this, while respecting also the fact that people have personal preferences.
Just wanted to quickly come here. Whosoever asked this question, that there is a good amount of work in the field of caste, that how touch, smell, feel, they all have caste connotation and caste implication in Indian society. This entire discourse on food and related issues of smell and others have also a very widespread caste politics. This is not actually saying anything personally, but there are also good amount of work, and I would refer here to you the Aniket Javerkar work, which focuses on feel, touch, smell, and it's the caste politics around in our country. So yeah, just wanted to mention. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And the next question to Ravivarma sir from Maithili Raju. They like to ask the questions directly, sir.
Hello, sir. I'm actually Chetna. I'm sorry it is showing it as Maithili because me and my sister share the same laptop. So the thing is, like, I've tried to work for Dalit organizations, but unfortunately what I'm seeing here is, this is my kind of observation that I've seen, that there are a lot of Dalits who are converted to Christians, who are converted to Buddhism, they've converted to Christianity, and so many of them have converted themselves as atheists. The problem here is there is no common ground for everyone to come together. It's so unfortunate. Everybody are in pain, everybody are going through the injustice, but there is no common factor that is bringing us together. And only thing that is bringing us together is the name of Ambedkar, Savitribai Phule and Jyotira Phule. But unfortunately, though they are our fathers, I'm a Dalit, so I love them dearly. I don't say I don't. But unfortunately, time has moved on, which has changed. We are educated here. We are youngsters. I mean, I won't say myself too young, but yeah, I'm a middle-aged woman. I'm trying to work out things, but unfortunately there is so much of old ideologies in their heads. They're not able to come out of it. The leaders, especially when I want to go to slums, I want to preach something, teach something, bring them out of that mindset, that old mindset, that the slavery mindset, and bring them to a mindset of a lot of hope and things like that. Unfortunately, they're not allowing. They're standing there. They will not allow us to go do the groundwork. So my question is, isn't this a time for every one of our elders to think about having a big paradigm shift? We really need it if we want to win this war. We know we are in the war zone right now, and it's like the small set of soldiers are going fighting there and coming back wounded. Nobody are able to take this on. There's a huge fight going on. If we don't, then right now we are in path wherein it is getting diverged into two things. Either you're going to fight and win, or you're going to go back to slavery. That is the moment right now. We will go back to slavery. There is no two words about it, the way the things are going in this country. But if we don't come together as one Dalit organization, being that we have Christian brothers, Muslims brothers, Buddhists, atheists, and every one of them, how can we bring them together? Though I know we can bring everybody on one ground through education, through love, empathy, compassion, and the one thing which really binds it together is pain and injustice. But why isn't anybody doing this? It's so unfortunate. I want to do it and they will not allow me to do it, so why can't every one of you do something about it? It's simply like we are having sessions. I've been gone through sessions. I've really fought. It's not like I've really gone and fought with politicians as well, directly, without so I'm telling, why isn't anything happening? It is because the fault is not with the upper caste at all, because upper caste are having their own ideologies. We don't have to break their ideologies, but we are not able to come out of our own ideology. We are not supporting each other. We brothers and sisters are not standing on together. So that is what I want to say. Like, why can't we be, why can't Dalits from Kashmir to Kanyakumari become one? We are 22% of the population. When I am putting the posts on the YouTube, Black Matters, guys are putting likes, but unfortunately my own Dalit brothers are not putting likes for that. They are not coming together.
It's a very good question. I'm happy that the question has been raised. If you just recollect, way back in the year 1996, there was a very big movement to bring together all the Dalit factions, cutting across religions under one fold to provide reservation. In fact, when Mr. H.D. Devegowda was the Prime Minister of India, he had initiated an action. If you recollect, Mother Teresa also went on strike, asking all the Christian institutions to be closed down, to allow the Dalit Christians to be allowed into the scheduled caste list. But then, when the issue was debated threadbare, it was realized that the kind of discrimination that is practiced against Dalits in Christians, against Dalits in Islam, is qualitatively different from what is practiced against Hindus. In Hindus, temple entry is barred. Among Christians, the church entry is not barred. While Hindus denied the education, generations after generations, Christians threw open their institutions to Dalits who got themselves converted to Christianity. So these comparisons were made, and finally it was felt that it is not possible for the Dalit Christians, Hindu Dalits, to compete with Dalit Christians who are better educated, well educated, English educated, and they will not be in a position to compete with an international community of Christians, and therefore they did not accept the proposal to come together. It was in these circumstances that that idea was dropped. Basically, untouchability is practiced only in Hinduism. There is no untouchability practiced among Christians. No untouchability is practiced among Islam. And therefore, the question of Dalit Muslims and the question of Dalit Christians experience will be totally different from what the Hindus have perceived and they continue to experience. It is in these circumstances, these factions could not come together, and that is why from the inception, the reservation was confined only to Hindu Dalits. But so far as the scheduled tribes are concerned, realizing that cutting across religions, they live as tribes in hilly and remote areas. See, that bar is not available, or it is not operating against Dalits among Christians and Dalits among Muslims. So this is the constitutional position, that Constitution has provided reservation in favor of scheduled castes only from among Hindus and Sikhs. Among Sikhs, it was a compromise on the floor of the Constituent Assembly, and later VP Singh opened it to Buddhists also, as some of the Dalits had by then converted along with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to Buddhism. So it is only in these circumstances, Buddhist and Sikh Dalits are entitled to scheduled caste reservations and not Christian and Islamic Dalits. That's the constitutional position as on today. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your words. Over to DK, sir.
I thank all the speakers for answering the questions of the participants. I now request our beloved principal, Professor N.S. Satish, sir, to render vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, DK, sir. It is my proud privilege to propose vote of thanks on behalf of Seshadripuram Unitary College on this occasion. At the outset, I thank Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center, American University, Washington, D.C., USA, and Ashoka University, Haryana, India, for associating with us to conduct this international webinar series. I express our wholehearted thanks to Dr.Wooday Krishna, sir, President Karnataka Gandhi Smaraka Nidhi, and Honorary General Secretary Seshadripuram Educational Trust, Bengaluru. We are grateful to your support for all our programs. Thank you, sir. I would like to express our sincere gratitude today to Chief Guest who has rendered inaugural address, Professor Ravivarma Kumar, former Advocate General High Court of Karnataka, India. Thank you very much for making this international webinar a grand success. I am humbled and grateful to you, sir. I would like to express our sincere thanks to Mukul Sharma, Professor Ashoka University, Haryana, for giving an excellent talk on theme. Thank you, sir, for your valuable words. You are the person who has given this real shape to this webinar series. Thank you very much, sir. I express our sincere thanks to Dr. Malini Ranganathan, the Director, Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center, American University, Washington, D.C., USA, for enlightening us through her expertise knowledge. Thank you very much, madam. I would like to thank all the office bearers of Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center, American University, Washington, D.C., USA, and Ashoka University, Haryana, and Seshadripuram Education Trust. I would like to thank Darappa Kunnur, Program Coordinator and Convener Nisarga Mitra, Sunil Kumarji, Coordinator IQSC, who have helped us to materialize this webinar. I express our gratitude to all the principals and conveners, members of our sister institutions and other colleges, academicians, research scholars, students and delegates across the globe for participating in this webinar. We will ever remain grateful to our teaching and administrative staff for this support. Thank you, one and all.
On behalf of all, I would like to thank our beloved principal, Professor N.S. Satish, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Once again, thank each and everyone. Now we conclude the webinar.